I still remember that morning as if it happened an hour ago. The frost was still hanging in the air, the kind that bites your lungs when you breathe too deep. I stepped out to get firewood, half awake, when I froze in place. 20 feet away, standing between the shed and my truck, was a bear. A full-grown brown bear, huge and silent, staring right at me. My first thought was that this was it. My hand went straight to the shotgun leaning by the door. My heart slammed, so loud I could hear it echo through my chest. But the bear didn't move. He just stood there, head low, shoulders trembling slightly. Something was wrong. Bears don't act like that. Not here, not this close. I whispered to myself, "Don't move, don't make a sound." But then I noticed something. His front paw barely touched the ground. He was limping. Blood had soaked into the snow beneath him, dark red against the white. I should have gone back inside, locked the door, called someone, anyone. But his eyes stopped me. They weren't wild or furious. They looked desperate. I know how crazy that sounds, but there was something human in that stare, something pleading. It wasn't the look of a predator. It was the look of an animal that had lost everything. The silence between us felt endless. I slowly backed toward the porch, not to run, but to keep my distance. The bear didn't follow. He just exhaled, like a sigh of pain, and dropped his head lower. My stomach twisted. It wasn't fear anymore, it was pity. I spoke before I could stop myself. "Easy there, buddy. No one's gonna hurt you." My voice shook. He lifted his head, and for a second I saw a flicker of understanding. Maybe it was just my mind trying to make sense of terror, but I swear he knew what I said. Then the wind shifted, carrying the metallic scent of blood to me. That's when I saw it. 3 small holes on his left shoulder. Bullet wounds. Fresh ones. Someone had shot him, and he'd walked all the way here, through the forest, down to my yard. I wanted to believe he'd just stumbled by chance, but deep down I knew better. He came here for a reason. I took one slow step forward. The snow crunched under my boot, and his ears twitched. He didn't growl, didn't flinch, just stared. I realized he was shaking, not from anger, but from exhaustion. I could see his ribs through his fur. Whatever had happened out there, it nearly killed him. I tried to remember what I'd read about bears, about what to do if you ever came face to face with one. None of that advice said anything about a bear begging for help. I took another step. My breath made small clouds in the cold air. The bear swayed, almost losing his balance. I stopped moving. My hands were sweating even though the air was freezing. If he charged, I wouldn't have time to aim. But he didn't. He lowered his body slowly, groaning softly, and sat down right there on the snow. I could see every shiver, every deep breath he forced out. His paw was mangled, bleeding from between the claws. There was no rage in him, just pain. I don't know what got into me. Maybe it was the look in his eyes, or maybe I just couldn't stand watching another living thing suffer like that. I put the gun down on the porch and raised both hands, palms out. It felt insane, standing unarmed in front of a bear, but in that moment it didn't matter. "It's okay," I said quietly. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The bear blinked, then turned his head slightly, as if trying to listen. His breathing slowed. For a long while, we just looked at each other, the man and the beast, 2 broken things meeting in the cold. I heard a soft whine escape from him, almost like a dog. That sound went straight through me. I could feel something in my chest tighten, something that told me I couldn't walk away. The sun started rising, painting the snow in gold. Steam rose from his fur as his body heat met the morning air. He was barely holding on. I took one last deep breath and whispered, "I'm gonna help you, all right? Don't move." Then I stepped off the porch, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but I kept walking, step after step, until I was close enough to see the fear and the hope fighting in his eyes. That was the moment I knew, whatever had brought him here, it wasn't over. Something, or someone, had done this to him. And by helping him, I might be stepping into something much darker than I could imagine. The bear didn't move when I came closer. He was breathing shallowly, his body trembling from weakness. I stopped a few feet away and crouched down. The air smelled of blood and dirt. His paw was swollen twice its normal size, the flesh torn and clotted with mud. When I looked closer, I saw the dull shine of metal under the fur. A bullet, maybe more than one. I knew I couldn't do anything alone. My first thought was to call Josh, a local vet and an old friend from high school. We hadn't talked in months, but he was the only person crazy enough to believe me. My hands shook as I dialed his number. When he picked up, I didn't even say hello. Josh, I've got a bear in my yard. He's hurt bad. I need help. There was a long pause, then laughter. A bear? You serious, man? You been drinking? I wasn't in the mood for jokes. No, Josh. I'm dead serious. He's bleeding. I think someone shot him. The silence on the line turned heavy. Finally, Josh sighed. All right, I'm on my way. But if you're pranking me, you owe me gas money. I didn't answer. I just hung up and went back to watching the bear. He hadn't moved, but his eyes followed every motion I made. When I took a step back, he let out a low moan that sounded more like pain than anger. I whispered, "It's okay, help's coming." It took Josh about 40 minutes to arrive. When he stepped out of his truck and saw the bear, his face turned pale. Jesus Christ, you weren't kidding. He set down his kit slowly, like he was afraid to breathe too loud. We both stayed still for a long minute. The bear lifted his head slightly, but didn't react otherwise. Josh muttered, "This animal should be dead. How the hell is he still standing?" I didn't have an answer. I just pointed at the wounds. "Can you do something?" Josh crouched next to me, studying the injuries from a safe distance. "Looks like .308 rounds. Hunters." He looked up at me sharply. "Someone did this on purpose." He opened his bag and pulled out a small tranquilizer gun. "I've got one shot, maybe two. If it hits right, it'll calm him down. If not, well, let's hope he's as tired as he looks." The dart hit the bear's shoulder cleanly. He flinched but didn't fight. Within minutes, his breathing slowed. Josh and I moved closer. The sight was worse up close. 3 entry wounds, 1 in the paw, 2 across the back. And scars, old ones, healed wrong. This bear had seen hell before. We cleaned the wounds as best we could, pulling 1 flattened bullet from his paw. Josh cursed under his breath. "These aren't recent, maybe 2, 3 days old. He's been walking on this all that time." I could see the anger in his eyes. Whoever did this didn't want to kill him quick. They wanted him to suffer. When the sedative started to wear off, we backed away. The bear blinked, groggy but calm. Josh packed up his kit and muttered, "I'll bring antibiotics tomorrow. Don't try feeding him. Just give him water if he gets up." After Josh left, the silence returned. The bear lay near the shed, breathing heavily, his head resting on the snow. Every few minutes, his muscles twitched from pain. I sat on the porch, watching, unable to go inside. The night crept in, and the forest around us went still. No birds, no rustling, just wind through the trees. Over the next few days, he didn't leave. He ate little, drank from the bowl I'd left out, and slept most of the time. I checked on him every morning, keeping my distance. He watched me with the same steady eyes as that first day, guarded, but not afraid anymore. By the 3rd night, the forest felt different. Colder. I woke up to a sound that froze my blood, a deep growl echoing through the trees. It wasn't him. He was still lying by the shed, his ears twitching. Another bear. Bigger, maybe. The sound came again, closer this time. He lifted his head, his body tense, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the fence. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside. The beam cut through the trees, and for a moment I saw movement, a shadow slipping between the pines. The injured bear let out a low rumble, not fear, but warning. Whoever or whatever was out there, he knew it. The growl faded. The woods went silent again. But in the snow near the tree line, I saw fresh prints, huge, deep, and recent. And half buried beside them, glinting in the moonlight, was a spent rifle casing. Someone had been there, watching, waiting, maybe hunting again. I stood there for a long time, the cold burning my face, realizing this wasn't just about saving a wounded animal anymore. Something darker was moving in those woods, and somehow, it had led that bear straight to my door. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still out there. The tracks in the snow haunted me. Whoever had fired that bullet casing I found didn't just pass through. They had been watching. The bear slept near the shed, his breathing slow but steady. I left him some water and checked the wounds. They were starting to close, though the paw still looked terrible. Josh had promised to stop by later, but I couldn't sit still. I needed to know where this all started. I packed a thermos, my flashlight, and my old hunting knife, then followed the prints into the forest. The snow was fresh, but the tracks were clear, wide, heavy, pressed deep into the ground. It was easy to follow them for the first half-mile until the trees thickened. I moved carefully, scanning the ground for signs of blood or struggle. After about an hour, I found it. A small clearing surrounded by broken branches. The snow here was disturbed, smeared with streaks of dried blood. Empty bullet casings glinted among the roots. I counted at least 6. Whoever had done this didn't miss much. There were drag marks too, long and uneven, leading deeper into the woods. My stomach twisted. The bear must have crawled all this way, bleeding and terrified. I crouched down, touched one of the marks, and felt the frozen crust of blood beneath my glove. It hadn't happened long ago, maybe 3 for days. Something else caught my eye near a fallen log. Fur. Not brown like the male's, but lighter, almost golden. A different bear. I froze, realizing what that meant. There had been more than one. I followed the drag trail until it ended near a shallow creek. There, half buried under snow, was a mound of disturbed earth. The smell hit me before I saw it fully. I brushed away the snow, revealing what was left of a bear's carcass. Smaller, younger, maybe a cub. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. The silence around me felt deafening. I stared at the small body, frozen mid-motion, and everything clicked. The bear at my place wasn't just wounded, he was grieving. He had lost his mate and his cub, and the people who did this were still out there. I stumbled back toward the path, my thoughts a blur. By the time I reached the truck, Josh was already there waiting, leaning against the hood with his hands in his pockets. "You look like hell," he said when he saw me. I told him what I found. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "Damn it. I heard something about hunters from the city last week. Some guys bragging at the bar in town. Said they'd found a bear family near the ridge. Thought they took them both down." "Both?" I repeated, my stomach sinking. He nodded. "Yeah, a big male and a female with a cub. I guess they were wrong about one of them." I leaned against the truck, trying to steady my breathing. "They thought they killed them all. But he survived. And now they might come back." Josh looked uneasy. "If they do, they won't like what they find. You should tell the ranger station, man. This is serious." I shook my head. The nearest ranger was 2 towns away, and by the time anyone came, the bear would be dead. I couldn't let that happen. We drove back to the house in silence. The bear was still there, watching us as we pulled up. Josh got out slowly, shaking his head. "I can't believe he's still trusting you. Wild animals don't do that." "He's not just any animal," I said quietly. "He's got nothing left." That night, I sat by the window long after Josh left, listening to the forest. The moon hung low, pale and sharp through the branches. The bear shifted outside, groaning softly in his sleep. Then, in the distance, I heard it, the faint rumble of an engine. My pulse spiked. Headlights flickered briefly through the trees, then vanished. I stood frozen, staring into the dark. Whoever they were back. And I knew exactly what they were looking for. Their trophy wasn't dead yet. The next night, the forest didn't sleep. Neither did I. The faint sound of an engine had burned itself into my mind. I kept checking the window, scanning the dark tree-line for movement. The bear lay still near the shed, but his ears twitched every time a branch cracked or the wind shifted. He felt it too, the danger coming closer. By midnight, fog rolled in from the valley, wrapping everything in silver. The air smelled of metal and fuel. Then I saw them, 2 figures moving through the mist with flashlights. They weren't trying to hide. Their voices carried through the cold air, sharp and careless. "You sure this is the place?" One of them said. "Yeah, the truck tracks were fresh. The bastards gotta be around here somewhere." They were armed. I could see the rifles slung across their shoulders. My stomach twisted. I wanted to believe they were just passing through, but deep down, I knew they were looking for him. The bear rose slowly, head high, nostrils flaring. A deep growl rolled out of his chest, low and steady. I whispered, "No, stay. Don't move." But he was already on his feet, limping toward the edge of the yard. I grabbed the shotgun from behind the door. My hands trembled, but not from cold. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't even brave. But the thought of them finishing what they started made something inside me snap. I couldn't let them take him. The flashlights grew brighter, sweeping across the trees. Then one beam caught the shed. I ducked behind the porch, heart hammering. "They're here," I whispered to myself. "Think." I ran to the old storm cellar behind the house and threw the doors open. Inside were tools, an oil lamp, and some tarps. It wasn't much, but it was cover. I dragged the lamp out, lit it, and hung it on a post near the fence, far enough from the house to draw attention. If I could buy the bear time to hide, maybe they'd go the wrong way. The voices got louder. One of them cursed. I see light up ahead. The bear turned toward the glow, confused. I waved my arms, whispering harshly, "Go." Into the woods. He hesitated, then limped toward the trees. Just before he disappeared into the dark, our eyes met again. For a moment, I felt like he understood. Then the first gunshot split the air. The lamp shattered. I dropped to the ground as glass rained around me. They were shooting toward the light, not knowing I was behind it. I crawled behind a fallen log, clutching the shotgun. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the echo of their boots crunching the snow. Another shot cracked through the night, closer this time. I shouted, "Stop. He's hurt. Leave him alone." One of them laughed. "That thing's worth more than your damn house, buddy. Step aside if you want to live." My blood went cold. They weren't just hunting, they were collecting trophies. A flash of movement caught my eye. The bear had turned back. Through the fog, I saw his massive shape emerging from the trees, shoulders heaving. He was standing between me and them now. One hunter froze, lowering his rifle in disbelief. "Holy hell, he's still alive." The other fired. The bullet tore through the air, hitting the ground near my boots. The bear roared, the sound shaking the forest. He charged, not fast, not clean, but enough to send the men scrambling. One fired again, and I heard him scream as the recoil knocked him backward. The other dropped his gun and ran. I got to my feet, running after the first man. He was on the ground, clutching his leg, blood soaking his jeans. His rifle lay a few feet away. I kicked it aside and shouted, "You shouldn't have come back." He looked up at me, terrified. "That's my tag. That's my kill. You don't understand." But before he could finish, the bear stepped beside me, panting hard, blood dripping from his shoulder. He didn't attack. He just stood there, towering over both of us, his breath steaming in the cold air. The man whimpered, crawling backward through the snow. The bear let out a low growl, deep and final, as if warning him to leave and never come back. The hunter didn't need telling twice. He limped away, half crawling toward the trees. When the forest fell silent again, I turned to the bear. His chest heaved, blood staining the fur along his side. I whispered, "You saved me." He blinked slowly, then turned his head toward the woods. For a moment, I thought he'd collapse. But he didn't. He took one heavy step, then another, until the darkness swallowed him. I stood there alone, the shotgun hanging loose in my hand, my breath coming out in shaky clouds. The snow was dotted with blood, mine, his, theirs. The only sound left was the wind moving through the trees. I didn't know it yet, but that night changed everything. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting for something both of us had almost lost, trust. Dawn came slowly, dragging the gray light across the snow. The forest looked peaceful again, but the silence felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. My yard was a mess of footprints, blood, and broken branches. The storm cellar lamp lay shattered, a black burn mark on the snow where it had fallen. It didn't feel real. The night had been chaos, but now everything was still. The police showed up just after sunrise. Someone must have heard the gunshots and called it in. I stood by the porch, numb, as they questioned me, took photos, and followed the tracks into the woods. They found the injured hunter half a mile away, limping and delirious. The other man had driven off sometime before dawn. When they loaded him into the ambulance, he kept mumbling the same thing over and over. It looked right at me. It looked right through me. I didn't tell them about the bear. Not everything, anyway. I said I fired in self-defense, that the animal ran off before they arrived. That was enough. I didn't know anyone the rest of the story. When they left, I went looking for him. His blood trail led toward the forest edge, where the snow was deeper. I found him lying by the creek, breathing hard, one paw stretched toward the water. The wound on his shoulder had reopened. He was weaker now, his breath coming in shallow bursts. I knelt beside him, my knees sinking into the snow. "Hey, buddy, you're okay. Just rest, all right?" My voice cracked. I didn't know if I was lying to him or to myself. He turned his head slightly, eyes half open. There was no fear in them, just exhaustion. I placed a hand on his side, feeling the slow rhythm of his heartbeat. His fur was coarse, damp with blood, but warm. I remembered how terrified I'd been the first time I saw him standing there, and now all I felt was helplessness. I wanted to do something, anything, but there was nothing left to do but stay. Hours passed. I built a small fire nearby to keep him warm, melting snow for water. Every so often, his eyes would flicker open, watching me quietly. I talked to him, nonsense mostly, stories about the house, the neighbors, the first winter storm that almost froze my pipes. He listened like he understood every word. By afternoon, the snow started falling again. Big, heavy flakes that covered everything in silence. He tried to lift his head once, groaning softly. I helped him up enough to drink from my hand. His breathing steadied for a while. Then he looked at me again, really looked. It was the same look from that first morning, the one that stopped me from pulling the trigger. Something in his eyes told me he knew it was time. He pushed himself up slowly, legs shaking under his weight. I stood beside him, ready to help if he fell, but he didn't. He turned toward the trees, his steps unsteady but determined. Snow fell across his back, clinging to the wounds, to the old scars. Halfway to the tree line, he stopped and looked over his shoulder. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he gave a soft rumble, almost like a sigh, and disappeared into the forest. The silence that followed hit harder than the gunshots ever had. For days after, I kept expecting him to come back. I'd leave out food near the shed, water by the creek, just in case. But the snow stayed untouched. The forest stayed quiet. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring into the trees at night, listening for that deep, steady breathing I'd grown used to hearing. It never came. A month passed. Life crept back into its routine, but the woods never felt the same. Then, one morning, while hauling firewood, I saw a movement near the ridge. A large shape, almost blending with the shadows. My heart jumped. I raised my binoculars. It was him. His coat looked fuller, the wounds healed. He stood tall, stronger than before, and for a few seconds, he looked right at me from across the distance. I didn't move. I just watched, afraid to break whatever fragile thread connected us. Then he huffed, a deep, calm sound, and turned toward the deeper forest, vanishing between the pines. I stood there a long time, the cold forgotten, the sound of the wind whispering through the trees. That morning, I realized something I should have known all along. Strength isn't about how much you can fight or how hard you can hit. It's about mercy, the kind that doesn't ask for anything back. That bear taught me more about humanity than most people ever could. And even now, every time the wind howls through the valley, I can almost hear him out there. Alive. Free.